Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 41. 'Tis but a flesh wound. Shota should have known something like this would happen. It was always one step forward and two steps back with Ivy. As soon as he stopped worrying so much about them getting food, they go and get themselves stabbed. Forget going gray by 30, he was going to go bald by 30, because this little shit was going to make him tear his hair out. A band of drunken dumbasses had decided that it was a good idea to parade around one of the gang's most active blocks, shouting profanities and making threats to them and their mothers and their sisters, and, well, you get the picture. They were alerted to the sounds of their slurred shouting, and before they could even get there, a gunshot rang out, and Ivy started booking it, leaving him in the dust. When he was finally able to catch up, Ivy was already in the thick of it, standing over a man on the ground, ordering him to keep pressure on his stomach while simultaneously fighting off 3 different guys who were seemingly trying to finish off the man with what he presumed to be a gunshot wound. Thankfully, Ivy had already managed to disarm whoever had had the gun, but it was still 3 versus 1. With a hostage of sorts, and there were still fights between other groups going on throughout the alley. Damn it, Ivy. As quickly as he could, he swooped down and introduced one of Ivy's assailants' faces with his knee. The guy went down in a heap before he turned away to deal with the mess that was the rest of the alley. Ivy could handle a 2 versus 1. He was too caught up in his own fights to realize Ivy's 2 versus 1 had turned into a 4 versus 1 when a couple of guys took down whatever poor drunken bastard they were wailing on and joined the fray. He had already taken down 3 of the people on the other end of the alley, and the rest were starting to realize this wasn't a fight they were going to win, and had started making hasty retreat. He contemplated going after them, but decided against it when he heard Ivy let out a strangled yelp before flipping a guy twice their size over their shoulder, head first into the ground, and they still had 2 others after them. He turned to run to their aid, but by the time he got there, they had already taken another one down, and the last of them gave up without a fight. As he cuffed them, he looked over to Ivy to make sure they were all right. They were breathing heavily, and they looked fine until he glanced down to their leg. There was a knife sticking out of their thigh, and they had their hand around the hilt like they were about to pull it out. "Ivy, don't!" He tried to warn them, but it was too late. They flinched a bit before saying, "It's only gonna cut me up more if I move around with it there," they explained as they took the belt off of one of the guys laying next to them and cinched it around their thigh like a tourniquet. They snapped twice and pointed at the man laying on the ground with a bullet wound in his abdomen as they started to limp away. Coming out of his brief moment of shock, he started to help the man apply pressure to the wound and sent out a ping to get an ambulance to his current location. "Ivy, where the hell are you going? You need medical attention," he shouted after them. "I don't do hospitals, Eraser. I'll be fine. I texted Suka. He's on the way," they said as they clumsily made their way up the fire escape. "Ivy, are you insane? Get back here," he demanded, but it had no effect. It was a glorified pocket knife. It was tiny. I can take care of it. They called down, already most of the way to the roof of the building. If he wasn't currently keeping a man from bleeding out, he would go up there and kick their ass. What the hell were they thinking? As soon as Tsukashi and the paramedics showed up, he gave the most bare-bones explanation he could and shot up to the roof after Ivy. If he weren't so pissed off and worried, he would have laughed. Ivy was sitting up against the roof access stairwell wall in a pair of all-night boxers with their flashlight pointed down to their leg, sandwiched between their cheek and shoulder as they stitched themselves up. He was about to chew them out, but he couldn't even be mad. There was a small container of alcohol next to them, and he could see the sterile packaging that they took the needle and thread out of. They were doing everything right, which was concerning in and of itself. As he walked closer to get a better look at the wound, he realized they were right. It really wasn't that bad. But they were still neatly stitching up their own leg without flinching. What the heck is wrong with this kid? Not a damn word about the boxers. Be a dear and hold the light, would you? They asked as casually as one would talk about the weather. If you don't get yourself killed, I'm gonna do it myself, he threatened as he took the flashlight. They replied, clearly not threatened at all. Aizawa burst into his office without so much as a greeting and made a beeline for the coffee maker. He swore he heard the telltale hum of the machine spitting out a shot of espresso 4 times before he watched the hero tip the mug back and down it in one go. You good, Aizawa? He asked in a worried tone. Peachy, he responded flatly before setting the mug down under the spout and brewing a standard mug of coffee. Student driving you mad again? He asked with a grimace. No, it's your problem child driving me mad, Tsukashi, he said before amending the statement. Actually, no, it's all of them. Well, they're not really my problem child anymore. I told the bigwigs that you're on the case, and they seemed pretty happy about that. They actually gave me another high-profile case to work on. I think I'm seeing a raise in my future if I play my cards right, he taunted. Tsukashi would have laughed at the face Aizawa pulled if he didn't think he'd get himself killed for it. He could swear he saw the bags under his eyes double in size as he glared at him. Clearing his throat, he continued, So, I am still the head on your problem child's case. Is that what brings you in tonight? Or are you just taking advantage of my coffee machine? He asked with a smirk. Eraser was going to kill him one of these days, and he was probably going to deserve it. He'd still leave him the coffee maker in his will. Maybe that would make up for it. The man was just too fun to taunt. Kid's been nagging me, 'cause I won't let them patrol with self-performed stitches still in their leg, he said bluntly. What? He replied with a healthy amount of alarm. Aizawa just looked at him, likely unwilling to elaborate on such a straightforward sentence. Tsukashi felt less bad about taunting him. He always pushed his buttons right back, even if it wasn't always so overt. Eraser, for the love of Kami, give me context, he pleaded. With an eye roll, he plopped down into one of the plush armchairs in front of his desk. After settling himself, he set the freshly brewed mug of coffee just to the left of the coaster on the side table while making eye contact with him. Absolute bastard. He no longer felt an ounce of remorse for his prodding. Aizawa just glared at him. Returning the glare in full force, Tsukashi said, Answer the question and use the damn coaster, you animal. He rolled his eyes again before shifting the mug into place and explaining, We got in the middle of a gang fight with the guys I just brought in. The fight went south and Ivy got outnumbered and then stabbed in the leg. And not only did they finish taking down the guys after them, they then climbed their way up onto the roof while I waited for you in the ambulance, and when I went back up to check on them, they were sitting there in their boxers with a flashlight between their shoulder and cheek, finishing up the last of the stitches they did on themselves." Sakashi took a moment to process that before responding. "Right, okay, that is insane, but why does that have you downing near lethal doses of caffeine at midnight?" "The only way they would agree to go home and rest is if I took over their patrols," he said, leveling a glare at him as if Ivy's insanity was his fault. Sakashi just leaned back in his chair, let out an exasperated sigh, and ran a hand through his hair. Aizawa hummed in agreement while taking another swig of his coffee. "So, how old do you think they are?" He groaned, shoving his face into his hands. "I have no idea. Going purely off looks, they could be as young as 12. But that's illogical given what they're capable of. Their appearance could be due to a number of things. If they are, in fact, homeless, they could have stunted growth from malnutrition, or they could look young due to a quirk, or it's simply their genetics." He shifted his face out of his hand and rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger before pinching the bridge of his nose and continuing, "Going off what they are capable of is a different story. Their skills could be due to a quirk, though I have erased their quirk several times during spars and they had little to no reaction, so either my quirk doesn't affect them or their quirk doesn't factor into their skills at all. If that's the case, then the skills they've built up would take many years to master, and I can't imagine they're less than 18 to 20 years old. Any younger, and they would have to be a prodigy, practicing straight out of the womb, or both, honestly." After letting out another dramatic sigh, he looked back up. "Any combination of age or quirk doesn't make sense. They're anomalous, and at this point, I think it's for the best to give up on trying to understand them. They've agreed to not go out without me, and they take the food I give them. I can keep them safe. Worrying any further isn't going to get us anywhere," he concluded, sounding no more energized than he did before slamming the 4 shots of espresso he'd just piled into his mug. End of chapter.